What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr. here. We got a great show for you guys today. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out here live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network, DraftKingsNetwork.com, the YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, and more. Couple of great guests for you guys today. L'Jarius Sneed, Super Bowl champion cornerback 2 times now for the Kansas City Chiefs. Going to stop by and talk with us about what it's like to win 2 Super Bowls in 4 years, as if this sport is hard at all. And then hoping to talk to our friend Rebecca Lobo, the Hall of Famer over at ESPN. As Dad, we had the big news happen finally last night. We've been chasing this all season and knew, coming off of an upset loss on the road against Nebraska, that Caitlin Clark was 8 points away from passing Kelsey Plum's all-time scoring record in NCAA Women's Division basketball. She does it in about a couple minutes' time last night as they boat race Michigan, and very early in that game, fittingly enough, Dad, a logo 3 from Caitlin Clark, she now becomes the all-time record holder.
Well, she had called that. Obviously, she knew she was going to break it, and she said when she does it, if it works out, she's going to do it from the logo. So that's kind of her signature. And again, she remembered yesterday she had said she didn't want the game stopped, but you have to obviously acknowledge the greatness of what she has done. You know, she went off in that first quarter, 23 points. I think there was only one other quarter in her career which she scored more, I think 25 in the fourth quarter of a game. So she went off early on in that game, got that out of the way. There are, for most, and we've seen this over the years, for those going for records that are happening while a game is playing, I think the thing they want the most is to get it done, right? Get it out of the way.
Yeah.
So you can kind of get back to what you do, because it's inevitable you're going to get it. There's records we've seen over the years where that was going to happen, and it was like, let's just get it done. And this was a no-brainer. It was going to happen. She still has 4 more regular season games and the tournament. We'll get into other records that she can catch. But, I mean, what can you say? I mean, she's going to go down, obviously, is the greatest scorer of all time in women's Division I history. Oddly enough, she could have another year if she wanted to, which would put a lot of things probably out of reach for other people. I would say I doubt she's going to take that and be the number 1 pick in the WNBA, but she said she'll decide on that later. But congrats to her. This was an inevitable thing, barring, knock on wood, any injury keeping her out. And even Angel Reese from LSU threw her out of congratulations as well after those two. So much was made off of their looks toward one another and such, and gestures and things. So that was very cool as well. But I mean, what can you say? I mean, we knew this was coming. It was just a matter of what game it was going to end on.
Yep, it was Coronation Day, and you're right. I saw the gesture there from Angel Reese. I saw Nike put out a placard for her that said, "If you break it, you own it," in reference to the record, which I thought was pretty darn cool. And now she does. She stands alone atop all this. She's the only player with over 3,000 points and 1,000 career assists already. Last night, I saw this per Mike Vopel and ESPN Stats and Info. Caitlin Clark scored or assisted on 79 points last night in the win against Michigan. It was the most points by any Division I player in a game over the last 25 seasons, scored and assisted on. So this is just what she's been, Dad, and I think there's been a lot of the comparisons. We talked about Steph Curry and Sabrina Ionescu getting ready to square off this weekend, but she's had a Steph Curry-like effect, and I think remembering what Steph did for so many young players when he was coming up and really starting to become a phenomenon. It was kids showing up to watch the pregame warm-up. It was all of the show around it, and just never being sure what you could get. That ability to create off the dribble that made him so much different than so many of the great three-point shooters we had ever seen. That's a lot of Caitlin Clark's game, where you've always got to be ready for the bomb to go off with her, like we saw on the shot that took her over the mark last night. And what it's created is sort of a sensation. There's a Caitlin Clark mania around women's college basketball, where we've seen ticket prices jump for every game that she's involved in. The fan attendance goes through the roof for every game that she's involved in. This is someone that's found a way to captivate using that same weapon in the three-point shot that Steph Curry has, and now it has a chance to probably inspire a generation of young women, especially, who are getting ready to pick up a basketball.
I don't think there's any doubt that that's going on when young men and women see players of this caliber doing what they're doing. And then you hear those players talk about it or the work involved. that can inspire a group. And you're right, because about the comparison with Steph, because anytime Steph had the ball, you were waiting for it to go up. It didn't matter where he was on the court. And that's the same thing with Caitlin Clark. You're expecting it. You're expecting her to launch it 10 feet past the 3-point line because she can, and you're just waiting for it to happen. And to really call her shot that said she was going to end it or get the record on the logo is pretty impressive. Just for comparisons, again, she broke Kelsey Plum's record. Kelsey Plum got her record in 139 games. And right now, Caitlin Clark is 126 games, so 13 fewer games, and she got the record. A lot of it, obviously, she made so many more threes. Plum made 343 threes in her career, and Caitlin is sitting at 487 and still going as far as made threes and what she's averaging just under 33 points a game. So, again, looking forward, they have 4 more regular season games. She's 99 points away from passing Pistol Pete Maravich for the most points in Division I history, men or women. She's averaging about 33 a game. She would need to average in the last 4 regular season games 25 a game. But remember that the tournament games count as well, and she played in 6 of them last year and getting to the finals. She could potentially play in 6 again. So that potentially could be 10 more games at 33 points a game. That's easy math. That's 330 points. And you look at others she's behind right now. She's still behind Kelsey Plum by 258 points for most points in a Division I season. So that's within reach with the tournament. And then overall, 316 points by Hall of Famer Pearl Moore. She set that AIAW record at Francis Marion. So she scores 316 points more than Caitlin Clark. And if Caitlin were to go all the way and again play 6 games at her average, that would be 330 points. So she possibly could get that one as well and own just about everything there is.
She's going to have the Big
Ten
Conference tournament too that we need to factor into that
That's
also.
Right.
So she's going to have plenty of games as an option here. And
you're right.
Dad, you talk about this. We're able to kind of do this predictive math because I think the other most impressive thing, when you've got a star player and you become box office and everyone's trying to build their schedule around, I want to see this person, the amount of times where you'll see, hey, a Caitlin Clark game is going into the second half of the fourth quarter and it's close or it's tied or she's doing this and people switch on. The ability to deliver on command is such an underrated part of being a superstar where people always feel like they know what they're buying when they're buying a ticket to a Caitlin Clark game, because no matter the attention, no matter the fact that every team knows that she is the chief scorer and is capable of doing all this and are certainly trying to stop that, they don't seem to be able to, and she still finds a way to go out and be this deadly effective. And having that level of consistency when you're buying a product and when you're trying to continue to build up the star power around a sport goes a long way when people feel like in this day and age where they've got so much that they can watch and there's so many content options, you're going to deliver consistently for me in a way that's exciting. That's an easy person to rally around and to do the things that we've done in terms of watching Caitlin Clark.
And remember, her team is right there, right? They were second. I know on Super Bowl Sunday they lost to Nebraska. They dropped to number 4. Now, I don't know if anybody's beating South Carolina this year, but it's not like she is like we watch Wemby play for San Antonio. We know that team's doing nothing, but we're watching him to see what he does. Caitlin Clark's on one of the best teams in the country, obviously because of her, but still, she has teammates out there that are pretty damn good as well to put them up there. So let's see that this is also tagged with a team that could make a run. Look how far they got last year and look what possibly they could do again this year. Though, like I said, I don't know if anybody's beating South Carolina, the only undefeated team left in basketball.
Yeah, South Carolina has that good old-fashioned, like, hey, we're just going to bigger, faster, stronger the hell out of you. There's plenty of skill there, but they are an overwhelming physical force that Dawn Staley's got at South Carolina. So, yeah, this might just be one where you clear out and they're going to do their thing. But in the meantime, we're going to be treated to more Caitlin Clark heroics. Like you said, she's going to be the number 1 pick in the WNBA draft. I know there's been some debate in the women's basketball community about what her projection to the next level looks like. We can certainly ask Rebecca about that when she joins us. The one thing we should make abundantly clear is, friends, for all the people saying, oh, she's making more money in college than she will in the WNBA, all of the endorsement deals that she has in college can still be hers and will still be hers when she goes to the WNBA and is also drawing a salary. This is silly. Stop it. That's not how any of this works. How it does work, though, is we get to hear from Caitlin Clark and on breaking the record from after the game last night. Here she was.
I don't know if you can really script it any better, and I thought we played really well tonight and that our defense could have been a little better, but just to do it in this fashion, I'm very grateful. I'm very thankful to be surrounded by so many people that have kind of been my foundation and everything that I've done since I was a young little girl, and I started crying watching that video just because I'm just filled with so much gratitude and love, and the way these fans support women's basketball is so special, and yeah, I mean, you all knew I was going to shoot a logo 3 for the record. Come on now.
Like she always seems ready for the moment. She's got that kind of charisma that comes along with being a player of that caliber. So it's been cool to watch. It's also I found this funny, Dad, because we went with the Steph Curry comparison where everyone called Steph like, oh, this accessible superstar because people can't be 6'8" LeBron James and do the things physically he can. Well, but people could shoot a 3 and do all that as if Steph Curry's not 6'4", 6'5" himself and the son of a former NBA player and the brother of an NBA player and grew up with that environment and that influence in his life that few people could replicate. The same thing's going to happen with Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark's like 6 feet tall. Like, you're not going to find a lot of girls that are 6 foot tall that are ice cold from beyond the arc like that. But it does feel that same brand of, oh, this is a skill that I can develop. I can hard work my way to being something similar to Caitlin Clark. So congratulations to her on just another incredible occasion and a day that ends in Y with Caitlin Clark dropping buckets and now becoming the all-time leading scorer in women's college basketball. Dad, while we're talking hoops, we can switch over. We had a little foot in the parking lot syndrome in the NBA last night, and Doc Rivers felt pretty comfortable calling it out. They lost the Bucks 113-110 to the Memphis Grizzlies. And as we know, the Memphis Grizzlies, devoid of pretty much all of their talent this year, not a good basketball team. And the Bucks now fall to 3-7 under Doc Rivers. And he called it out like he saw it right after the game. Here was Doc.
You know, these losses, obviously you don't want to lose games like this ever. Does that change the way I think about the team and where I think no, it doesn't at all. I got a lot of confidence in this group, but we're going to have to make changes as far as how we want to play every night. We come back in this on our set, 2 guys forget what we're running. Then we miss the shot, and then nobody gets back. That's how we start out the third quarter. That tells you all you need to know about where our heads were. We had some guys here, and we had some guys in Cabo.
Hey, I promise you that foot in the parking lot syndrome is so real. When you know you've got a break coming up, whether it's the bye week for us in football or the All-Star break, for these guys that have been going since, this fall, and it's a long grind to get to this point because it's not a true halfway mark of the season. Dad, it's a pretty natural thing that happens to a lot of guys. But for Doc Rivers, who's still, like we said, 10 games into the job, he's got the unenviable task that he said himself, I wouldn't wish on anybody, of trying to coach defense into this group that's kind of struggled on that end all year.
Well, and this would be a little different had they been playing well, had they been 7-3 under Doc and not what they are and 3-7. 11-13 since January 1st. So if they were playing better, you would maybe understand it a little more because you're right, it's real. That is absolutely real with these teams. If people didn't know out there, we are at the All-Star break right now. The games last night were it. So guys who aren't going to be part of the All-Star weekend in Indianapolis are going to be either sitting at home, chilling, or going somewhere, and that's obviously what Doc was referencing. So this hasn't changed much at all for Doc since he got there. They're sitting there in the third slot, but they're 8.5 behind the Celtics, who are, just smoking at this point. The Knicks are only a game and a half of them away from them in the 4th slot. So they got to figure something out at some way. You basically have the same players on your team. They just have to find a way to play differently. And as we've been mentioning, especially on the defensive end.
Yeah, I don't know. Part of me looks at this and goes, hey, we always knew it was going to be a cumbersome takeover. And the game right before the All-Star break, where you are looking forward to some time off, regardless of what the record is and how the season's done, it's still a slog after a while. I mean, January basketball has been rough for a lot of people. It's inspired a lot of the conversations that we've had about, is the season too long, and all these different changes we could potentially make, when the reality is just like, hey, a season that's got 80-plus games is going to have a couple of stretches where things look pretty rough. And overall, with the core of this Milwaukee Bucks team, they're going through this coaching change right now, and they're coming up on this. There's a natural frustration that builds up, or a natural bit of, lethargy, whatever you want to call it, that all of a sudden is going to have you looking like this. So I'm not all that worried about the Milwaukee Bucks, Dad. Now, I'm with you, as we'll have a talk about the Boston Celtics coming up here in a short time. This might just be freight train from hell situation, where they're finally going to do their version of what the Denver Nuggets core last year was able to do in getting over the hump by staying healthy, staying together, doing this the right way overall. But for the Milwaukee Bucks, talent-wise, it's all still there for the most part, and they're going to have that about 30-game stretch after the All-Star break to come back refreshed and really lock this in, and that will be the test. I think especially the third, you want to talk about the next 10 games coming out of the All-Star break, with now that you've been and had some time away, what emphasis do you come back with on all of the changes Doc's been trying to make?
You know how they always say, this person, X person's not walking through that door. You got the players you got. Well, the Bucks did sign Danilo Gallinari, so he is coming through the door. Though I don't know what kind of difference that's going to make, but he is someone new.
I was going to say, I don't think that those are words that mean very little to you, to me, and most everybody else. I think at this current juncture. So we'll wait and find out that. Shout out to our friend Amin El Hassan on the Patino game that you just tried to play. And by the way, it's a good reminder that it is All-Star Weekend, and our friend Charlotte Wilder and Amin El Hassan and the Oddball podcast and show here on DraftKings Network are going to be out in Indianapolis at All-Star Weekend, checking in with everything out there. So they'll be able to tell you how it looks from that standpoint. And Dad, I can understand that part of it too. We always have this talk when it comes to like guys in the NFL and the Pro Bowl and how much people want to play in that. Like, the NBA has spent a lot of time trying to fix the All-Star game that's coming up, and all the things especially that go on with that game, where we had seen gaudy scores get up into the 190s and it looked ridiculous. And I could partially understand it for a lot of the guys that have been around it for a while, that, man, a vacation away with the family for that weekend seems a lot nicer than having to go at this point to again, not to besmirch them, but Cabo sounds a lot nicer than Indianapolis in February. That's, I think, a reality we can all accept.
Yeah, a lot of guys used to skip the Pro Bowl. They just didn't feel like after the season going for. Then it was in Hawaii, which everybody's like, Hawaii, but these are guys who've made multiple Pro Bowls that were like, you know what, I just want to chill after the season here, and that's what you're right. A lot of these players want to do as well, and even though they do try and dress up the All-Star games. In all honesty, I don't think I've watched I watched a little bit of the hockey All-Star actual game, the 3-on-3 part of it. I don't remember ever. Yeah. It's been a while since I've watched the NBA actual All-Star game. In both those sports, I like the skills challenges that goes on the day before. I like that in hockey, and how they put the $1 million on the competition the day before, the bunch of competitions, I think, for 8 players. And then in the NBA, what we're going to see, the slam dunk contest, 3-point contest, the skills, different skills challenge. I like that stuff way more than I like the game. The game isn't really much, but it's not like you can do a whole lot about it. They've tried different things, different scenarios, but it's always going to be no players getting in anybody's way here. It's just going to be a scoring fest.
Yeah, no, guys decided they're not going to get here to get injured. For who, for what, and God, the Pro Bowl being in Hawaii compared to the NBA All-Star Game being in Indianapolis. I don't know, man. It's supposed to be a reward. That's all I'm going to say about it as we continue to move forward here and take a look at that freight train from hell in Boston that seems to be mowing through this NBA season. Can they get it all the way to the top finally this year? Next. So we mentioned the foot in the parking lot in the NBA, as we are now officially in the parking lot. We were at the All-Star break, and we talked a lot about the Milwaukee Bucks, but Dad, it's time to pay some respects to that team in Boston that has just decided to lap the field right now. The Celtics, 6 games ahead of the second-place Cleveland Cavaliers in the Eastern Conference right now, the best record in basketball at 43-12. They are the first team to eclipse the mark of 40 or more wins before 20 or more losses this season. Now, there's about 6 other teams that have that potential, but it's the old 40-20 rule that Phil Jackson used to talk about back in the day. And Dad, the way that Milwaukee has gone about doing, the way that Boston has gone about doing this is incredibly impressive. Now, this was an article in Forbes as of February 10th, so last week there, that the Boston Celtics, filtering out garbage time, are 3rd in offensive rating and 3rd in defensive rating. They're outscoring opponents 9.3 points per 100 possessions. 28 of their 42.8 long-range shots a game from 3 have been catch-and-shoot opportunities, and that's 65.5% of those on the team. They generate 43.7% of their overall shots from beyond 3, their highest figure in the league. So they are bombing away from beyond the arc in the way that's become modern basketball. They've got 3 guys averaging over 20 points. Kristaps Porzingis has been an awesome addition to this team. So, Dad, it's got to be championship or bust at this point for Boston, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And oh, by the way, you mentioned those 3 averaging over 20. They finally have someone in the top 10 in scoring in the league. They were doing all this without any top 10 scorers, and now Tatum is sitting in the 10 slot, just jumped in there. Just to let you know, the threes they're making, they're on pace for 1,325 threes, which would rank 2nd all-time behind the 22 Warriors, who they just chuck those up at an amazing rate. But so does Boston. This is where we are now in the NBA, and this is what you do. And that 40-20 rule that we're talking about, 40 wins before 20 losses, 3-point line got installed in the 79-80 season. Since then, 40 of the last 44 champions have met the 40 before 20 criteria. And as we mentioned, there's a few more that can hit it, like Minnesota's 39-16, so you got to believe they're going to hit it. You have teams that are 36-17, 37-17, Oklahoma City, and even Cleveland. The Clippers 36-17. So a few more teams could possibly hit it. But where I'm with you. It's almost like talking about last year, the Atlanta Braves, what they did, motoring through the regular season. Then it was like, well, you got to close this deal off. It's kind of like we're talking about with San Francisco, right? We keep saying you got the best roster in the NFL, and you've lost in a Super Bowl, lost in 2 NFC championship games, and lost in another Super Bowl. So you're not, closing that deal with arguably the best roster in the game, and you also don't have Pat Mahomes. That's kind of where Boston is showing up right now as so dominant that you just say, okay, this is great, but let's fast forward and let's see what happens in the postseason.
Yeah, that's why I in the segment before kind of likened them to what we saw from last year's Denver Nuggets, where you've had a largely similar core of players that have been at the helm of this. I mean, God, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are still so young, but we've been talking about them at this level for so long because back when Kyrie Irving was with the Celtics and injured, they went toe-to-toe with LeBron James in the Eastern Conference Finals and put everyone on notice, put themselves on the map. And so we've been aware of them in that postseason conversation. They've had legitimacy in that area for a long time, but we've still been waiting for this current iteration of the Boston Celtics to get over the hump in that meaningful way. And one thing that I think has worked hugely in their favor, Dad, and we talk about this all the time in our sport a lot, because in football with the prevalence of injury, you can almost always look up at the end of the season and the teams hanging out in the postseason are the ones that are the healthiest. Yep. Continuity matters. And in basketball, it's the same way. As of last Friday, the starting lineup for the Boston Celtics of Drew Holiday, White, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Kristaps Porzingis had played a total of 884 possessions. That's the 8th most of any lineup in basketball. And with that lineup, they had a plus 12.2 net rating. They've been on the court together long enough to figure out, kind of to the polar opposite of what the Milwaukee Bucks are trying to do, with a new group that's been together this year, now dealing with a new coach and a new voice. Everything's been consistent for Boston, so this feels like it's got to be the year. While you've got some tumult in the Western Conference of some teams that are going to be doing this at a high level, some of them for the first time, like the Minnesota Timberwolves. And in the East, while teams like Milwaukee are trying to figure themselves out, while the 76ers don't have Joel Embiid, while Cleveland is trying to take this step up in weight class, this is a golden opportunity for a Boston Celtics team that feels like in so many ways it's come together for them this season.
Yeah, it really does. And it's something to mention the continuity of that starting lineup. It's something you can never predict in any sport. We can sit there, everybody make their prognostications at the beginning of the year, but you have to take into consideration there's going to be injuries. And we talk about that, as you mentioned, in the NFL, especially on the offensive line. How many different O-line combinations do you have during the season and how that can affect you? Well, when you're top 10, like Boston is, with keeping your guys together and playing those possessions, this is what you get. But it does. I think it just puts more pressure. I mean, they're 6 up on Cleveland, where it's much closer. You're going all the way down to 5 and 6 in the West, where it's only 6 away from the top of the conference there. It's a lot closer with those teams there, and you got to figure Boston's probably going to pull away a little bit because of your explanations of the other teams as well. But I mean, we'll just continue to say it's almost, and it's a shame because you got to go through the regular season to get to the postseason. But ho-hum, let's see what you did. Last year, you lost in the conference finals to Miami. The year before, you lost in the NBA finals to Golden State. So, it's that time. Like I said, close but no cigar isn't going to cut it for a team that's used to hanging banners, even though, it's been a little while.
Well, speaking of a team that's used to hanging banners that did something interesting last night, Dad, we talked about the Golden State Warriors the other day a lot in terms of their lineup, what they've got going on, a close but no cigar against the Clippers. Last night for the Warriors, they get a win over the Utah Jazz. Klay Thompson, for the first time since his rookie season, came off the bench and decided to absolutely drop bombs, went for 35 and looked much more like his old self. It was the first time, again, since 2012 that he had done that, Dan. Brandon Podchimsky replaced him in the lineup. They're one of their rookie guards. And, Dad, for Klay Thompson, I've had a lot of empathy for his situation this season. I guess empathy is probably the wrong word because I don't have an experience being as great as Klay Thompson was and having to swallow your pride the way he has this season. And he talked about his ability to be a good teammate and not mope and not pout. Steve Kerr's talked a lot about this publicly and privately with him. Just really impressed with what Klay Thompson pulled off last night. And quite honestly, Dad, for a Warriors team that's still in the play-in bracket right now, if you can get this version of Klay to show up even half the time, especially in this capacity, boy, does that change some of what I think Golden State can be capable of, because in a lot of the games I'd seen this year, he had just been a non-compete compared to his old self in so many ways.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. 35 off the bench, that's crazy. He ends up playing, 28 minutes and just, hits 7 threes, takes 13 shots there. But you're right, if they can pull that off, and to his credit, and I know a lot of people say, well, he's a pro, that's what you do. Well, when you're that great for that long and then you're relegated to the bench, man, these are human beings as well. And there's pride on the line. And as he said, you can pout or you can go out there and you can respond, and he said games prior, he did not respond well. And he took it out on some assistant coaches who he's apologized to as well. So he wasn't handling it well at first. And that's not shocking. It's very different for athletes that are this great to all of a sudden say, oh yeah, okay, I'm on the bench now. Cool, no problem. There's going to be a little tug of war inside, on how you're going to handle that. And Steve Kerr, luckily you have a coach that the players respect in Steve Kerr, who can kind of explain this to Klay and what the situation is. And they've hung banners. He's been one of the greats to get it done. And he looks to be accepting of that role. And that can only be good for Golden State.
Yeah, for a guy who has talked about his body and what injury has wrought on Klay Thompson over the last handful of seasons, may finally be having an effect, but maybe this is a way to harness the best of what's left of one of the better players and was certainly half of one of the best backcourts that we've ever seen for so long in Golden State. Coming up next, let's head to the Pacific Northwest. A big decision made that could affect the future for the Seattle Seahawks and their new coach, Mike Macdonald, next. His money is exactly what the Seahawks said to their quarterback, Geno Smith, yesterday, Dad. They announced, courtesy of ESPN NFL insider Adam Schefter, that Geno Smith would be paid his $12.7 million on his contract by remaining on the roster through this Friday. That portion of his deal for next year becomes fully guaranteed as of today, and they said he'll remain on the roster, so it'll trigger that. It now converts from an injury guarantee to fully guaranteed money. And Dad, there's a lot of these sort of mechanisms in people's contracts, but I think for Seattle, this becomes a means to give them options as well, because Geno Smith costing them, I think, with this and some of the other bonuses in his contract, right in the area of $20 to $22 million next season is pennies compared to what we know is most of the quarterback market. And so it gives them either that option of a cheap player to come back and play for them, or if they were going to try and wheel and deal, man, a pretty appealing asset in a guy who may not have played as well last year as he did in 22, but at that price, that experience, and this talent level would still be coveted, I'd imagine, by a number of teams out there.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. And who you can wheel and deal for at this point, if you're not going to have, that's always the question, Mike. If you're not going to have Geno, for a team, you know, that you're looking to win still right now, where are you going to go, right? Obviously, Russell Wilson's not coming back there. We sit there and talk about players that are available. Do you make a move for Justin Fields, who is still kind of a young player on the rise. Do you make a move for Baker Mayfield, who had a career year last year in Tampa Bay, but I don't think he's getting out of there. And while Geno had a little more of a down year, his last 2 years starting in Seattle, he averaged just under 4,000 yards passing, 25 touchdowns and 10 interceptions a year. So, I mean, you would take that out of your starting quarterback. Now, again, this year, 20-9 as opposed to 30-11 the year before, so down a little bit. But I guess that's always the question. If not him, what are you going to do? I mean, if you have him for basically a cap hit of 20 to 22, you're right, that's pennies on the dollar for a quarterback on what else you may be able to achieve with that roster. So from a money standpoint, it's good for the team. And I'll continue to say, where are you going to go if you don't have Geno Smith at quarterback?
Yeah, I completely agree, Dad. I don't know how you're going to improve at this point in the offseason on what Geno Smith provides for you. And keep in mind, a lot of what happened with Seattle offensively, remember, there were injuries, especially on the offensive line, that affected that team early on in the season. You look at the end of last season, Dad, Geno Smith threw an NFL record 7 go-ahead TD passes in the fourth quarter or overtime last season, and in the last 6 weeks of the year, posted the league's best total QBR. So finished the year on a strong note, and now is going to be dealing with a new head coach that's going to come in and fortify a defense that wasn't giving them a ton of help last year. And, oh, by the way, on offense, all that Ryan Grubb conversation we just had about him leaving Alabama, I'm fascinated to watch him work with the weapons in Seattle. We saw by the end of last season, Ryan Grubb in college made use of multiple tight end personnel groups there, lots of pre-snap motion, had a room full of dog-ass NFL wide receivers, and now what's he walking into? A team in Seattle that at their best last year was using a bunch of multiple tight end personnel to run that rushing attack, had a great group of wide receivers to work with there, and as a quarterback that I feel pretty confident in saying is going to be able to operate the mechanics of this offense and make use of the downfield passing stuff, take in all the information Ryan Grubb is giving him, and when those two tackles are healthy that they hit on in the draft 2 years ago, feels like a pretty good unit. So in a world where you're not going to go out and find Seattle's version of Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen this offseason, man, having Geno Smith on your roster, knowing what you're also about to get as an offensive mind in Ryan Grubb, feels like a pretty good place to be if you're Mike Macdonald walking into year one.
You know, we talk about depth on the offense because we've talked about that especially with San Francisco. You know, with Metcalf and Lockett and Smith and Jigba, and you had two backs in Walker and Charbonnet that had over 60-some receptions out of the running back position. So I think they could now use their money on the defensive side of the ball, right? You know, the O-line, they need to stay healthy, obviously. So I think you'll see them, you know, the defensive side of the ball, I think, is where they can concentrate because I think they're set with their personnel on offense.
Yeah, and listen, if you told me, so Seattle's sitting at 16 in the draft right now. If you told me, hey, if one of these quarterbacks falls, like we're having all this conversation right now, we had Field Yates on yesterday talking about, you know, you can get Jaden Daniels, the second quarterback off the board. We can go 1, 2, 3 in quarterbacks in this draft. Bo Nix might get drafted. J.J. McCarthy might get drafted in the first round. If one of these guys does slide down to them at 16, and all of a sudden you told me, hey, Seattle looked at this opportunity and said, we got Geno for cheap right now. We can put him out there and we can try and do the Mahomes thing where if we got one of these guys we like enough at that value spot right there and start to build for the future, that could make some sense to me. Like, yes, you'd like to build on defense, but Mike Macdonald's also a guy that we think scheme is going to help you some in that. You're going to need to deal in personnel, and free agency could still be a place that they do that. But, Dad, I do think overall, this gives them options. And I think dealing him is an unlikely option for the reasons you mentioned at this point.
Yeah,
but
agreed.
I think that price tag does give them options, and the way his contract is structured gives them some options about how they want to build that position in the future.
You mentioned Field Yates yesterday. Did you see who he had them picking at the 16 slot? You think it would help their offense a little bit? Brock Bowers. I mean, if you added that, now I think they need more help on the defense. Their defense was not very good last year, but my God, if Brock Bowers is there, I don't know how he's at 16. He is a top 5 on the board talent, but at such a specific position, that's why you'll see tight ends go a little bit lower. Yeah, if he's at 16, if 16 comes around and Brock hasn't been picked yet, Man, you grab him. I mean, I think Noah Fant last year had 30-some receptions for Seattle. I believe it was right in that area there. Brock Bowers is going to be a star in the NFL.
Bro, Brock Bowers, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and the running back room you just mentioned in Seattle. No wonder Ryan Grubb was so eager to leave and head up to the Pacific Northwest. I don't blame him one bit. So we'll take a look at that, Dan. I think there are some interesting, larger questions we can ask about the quarterback position overall going into this offseason. You mentioned Baker Mayfield as one of the guys who's going to be a free agent this offseason. There's not a lot of guys out there, and Charlie Kravitz, great producer of Dominique Foxworth's podcast yesterday, asked the question when I was on with those guys about trends or things that are patterns or things that are just noise right now in the NFL. And there is this wonder with, all right, you got a guy like Brock Purdy who got to the Super Bowl last year. There are only so many Patrick Mahomes watching the earth right now. Do you think we'll see more teams, instead of trying to reach for big free agent signing quarterbacks like we saw with Aaron Rodgers and the Jets last year, like we've seen the Buccaneers do with Tom Brady, or the Matthew Stafford Los Angeles Rams trade? With a couple of teams swinging and missing recently, do you think we'll see more teams say, hey, maybe we'll hold pat with a Baker Mayfield or a Geno Smith right now, rather than try and make these big swings and wait for the guy that we can draft?
I think because those big swings paid off, you still might have teams trying to do that. Tampa Bay did win a Super Bowl. Rams did win a Super Bowl after they made those deals, one a free agent and the other a trade. And I think more would look at the Stafford situation, because, you know, everybody says, well, Tom's the GOAT. Look what he did. I mean, if you get one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, certainly you're going to do better. But it was the Rams swapping quarterbacks with Detroit, Goff for Stafford, and then them winning a championship. So I don't know. A lot depends on who's out there, because they would love to get away with not having to pay that or have that. But right now, really, in my opinion, we're looking at two quarterbacks, Mike. Baker Mayfield's going back to Tampa Bay. I have no doubt about that. To me, it's like, where is Justin Fields going to end up? And where is Russell Wilson going to end up? And let's remember, Russell Wilson, while a big name, is not a big money hit. You can get him on the cheap because Denver's picking up the tab. So that kind of changes the equation a little bit on what you want to do.
And Russell Wilson really is one of the cautionary tales on the other side when you look at him, Deshaun Watson, these big money veteran swings that were most recently taken that have failed famously so far. Aaron Rodgers is sort of incomplete because he was hurt so early into this year. But it does call into question. That had been the copycat league strategy we had seen teams with great rosters do, trying to do that. But it also does make you wonder, all right, if this quarterback is so great, why is he available right now for me to go and get, is the question I think more teams might be asking going forward now that we've seen a bigger sample. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. It's time for Cash It or Trash It, presented by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See DraftKings.com for details. And in this edition of Cash It or Trash It, we're going to take a look at the NBA skills competition coming up. Dad, you said you love it so much. Well, Saturday night, you can put your money where your mouth is. We can start with the NBA's dunk contest, which, as always, is a little bit hit or miss at times. How about this? What a statement. Defending champion Mac McClung of the G League Osceola Magic is the favorite at -165 on DraftKings Sportsbook. He's going to go up against Jaylen Brown from the Boston Celtics, Miami's Jaime Jaquez Jr., and the Knicks' Jacob Toppin. Dad, are you cashing or trashing Mac McClung going for the repeat?
Well, there's a couple of things here. I think because, he's the G League player here, that he's going to know he needs to ball out, against these NBA guys. But there's also Jacob Toppin, who's played, in just 5 games with the Knicks. His brother, Obi Toppin, was with the Knicks and now with the Pacers. I'm going to go between those two, but I think McClung, because he's in the G League, realizes that he has got to come just absolutely calling on this like he did last year. So I'm going to go with him as a repeat.
It's the advantage you have visually, like optics-wise, when you are the small white guy doing these dunks cannot be overstated. He is a 6'2" white guy playing in the G League. And so dunking is his thing. Like, short of what I always wanted, which was getting the professional dunkers that you see on YouTube, the guys that just do that full time, like street ball players, getting them in the dunk contest to just zhuzh it up at this point, because creativity, it's so hard because we've seen so many dunks that this, I think, does give you a decided advantage here, Dad. I'm going to be honest, seeing a name like Jaylen Brown in the dunk contest stunned me. The fact that someone of that caliber, because usually most star players run screaming the other direction from this.
Yep, agreed. And that's been the bummer, because this always had, way back in the day, this always had big name guys. Always. This was the moment of the NBA All-Star Weekend that everybody, the game, anything else was secondary to the dunk contest. And it has really, really taken a dive. At times it would come back. It's a real peak and valley event right now.
I was walking into dinner at a restaurant last night, and on the TV, I thought I was just getting ready to walk by, and I thought it was just playing a basketball game that was up there. And all of a sudden, I did a double take, and I looked up and realized it was a replay of, I believe, the 2012 NBA All-Star Dunk Contest, where we had Orlando Magic era Dwight Howard. And that was the dunk contest. You remember he put on the Superman cape. He went up and stuck the sticker of himself up on the backboard. Like, that was golden, one of the last years or few of the golden age where the dunk contest had big star names and people that were trying to do incredibly fun, creative things with the dunk contest that didn't feel overwrought at that point. So it was just a reminder of what we've lost. Now, there's going to be 5 judges for this game. Each dunk's going to score from 40 to 50, given by every judge, 5 scores. That'll add up to the individual score for the round. We've got Hall of Famer and former Slam Dunk Contest champion Dominique Wilkins joining there. Fred Jones, 2004 Slam Dunk champion. The Hall of Famer Gary Payton, the Hall of Famer Mitch Richmond, and then Darnell Hillman, a star for the Indiana Pacers back from the ABA days there. So they're going to get in the first round and the second round, each dunker is going to get 1:30 plus 1 additional try to complete 1 dunk, and will be limited to just 3 attempts. And Dad, we always know that's the secret to the great part of the dunk contest is you got to hit it on the first or second try. There's nothing sadder than watching a guy have to default to his second tier dunk when he's like 50 seconds in, and we're all very awkwardly sitting there.
Yeah, that's hurt this contest as well, when you have sometimes more misses than makes. You're right. It kind of takes the air out of the room a little bit. When they make it on their 5th try, you're like, oh, okay, great. You finally got it. So I think, in my opinion, that has hurt the contest a bit as well. Which I hate, because we've normalized this otherworldly athleticism these guys have so much that, we're ho-hum because it takes them a few extra tries to bounce a ball off the ground, go between their legs, knock a cup of water off their 7-foot buddy's head, and then dunk it home. God forbid it takes them a little bit longer to get to that point as I sit on my couch and burp up Tums. So let me ask you this. Would you rather be the guy that can jump the highest and do incredible things on a basketball court, or just be able to jump as high as you can like that and be a basketball star, be the fastest runner in the 100 meters, or be the strongest guy in a weightlifting contest?
And at my core, I'm such a meathead that being the strongest boy seems like such a cool thing. But man, I got to tell you, having bunnies like that would be awesome. Just because it's something I never had. I had like a week in my life where I could dunk, and it was coming down our driveway at home in Connecticut that had a little bit of a slope one way. So I got a little bit of help and momentum coming down there. But besides that, I could never really sky like that. And it would be pretty cool to be able to walk into just a park anywhere and pull that off.
I think as former linemen, the strength thing appeals to us, but as we'll see later in the show, with the lack of my jumping ability, I think I would really love to be able to jump way higher than you're going to see later.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool for us to get a little redemption for you, big guy. Something that requires comparatively less athletic ability, but winds up always being really entertaining for me for some reason. We got the 3-point contest. Now, we've talked about Steph Curry versus Sabrina Ionescu in the 3-point shootout. That's a separate contest than what we're going to have in the traditional 3-point contest on Saturday night. Defending champion Damian Lillard is back to defend his crown. He's the favorite on DK Sportsbook at plus 475. Even though he's having his worst 3-point shooting season among the 8 participants. So, Dad, we've got Damian Lillard. Are you cashing or trashing it for him defending his 3-point title?
I'm going to trash that. I'm going to go with either Tyrese Halliburton. It's been his year, right? He has been the man this year. Yeah. So he's in it. Or, I'll take the easy chalk and look at the guy who's got the best 3-point percentage this year, right? Just a tick under 45%, and it's Malik Beasley from the Bucks. So I am going to trash that one on Damian Lillard.
The funniest possible outcome is Karl Anthony Towns, though.
Karl
Anthony Towns, who went on, I think it was Pat Beverly's podcast, and dubbed himself the greatest shooting big man of all time, and talked about how when he retires, he hopes people recognize and acknowledge that he changed the game in ways that none of the rest of us can see at this point. But listen, Cat called his shot, and now they're the best team in the West, at least record-wise, and so he gets to own some of that. But just giving Karl Anthony Towns more fuel to go out here and talk bleep above his weight class, that seems like the funniest possible outcome to me, because I'd imagine there's going to be a lot of people that would eye roll at that.
Yeah, and it just seems like too many shots, right? This will wear you down in a couple of rounds, right? And the big thing is, when do you see players stop using their legs on the 3-pointer? And you wonder with the big man if he wears down a little quicker than the others on the amount of shots you're going to have to take if you move on in this contest.
Yeah, he's the only one, if you look at attempts on the season, of the 8 participants in the in the 3-point contest, that's attempted under 300 threes this season. He's 120 for 275, which has given him that percentage, versus a guy like Trae Young, who's put up 450. Donovan Mitchell, who's been awesome this year, has put up 400 threes on the season. And so, yeah, for Damian Lillard, I don't know. It's been interesting with Dame this season. It hasn't obviously come in, and they've had, the coaching change and so many different things that have moved on around that team. But I think we all kind of thought it would come in and be a lot more lights out a lot earlier than it's been so far. Yeah. For Damian Lillard, who's in the unenviable spot of leaving the place that he had been for so long, where we had said he had been kind of recused from the discourse. We had just put Dame off to the side and said top 75 player all time. One of the best shooters ever, Dame time, all this stuff, without necessarily saying and asking the questions about where your MVPs have been, why you haven't been able to lift your team to a championship, why you've only got that one Western Conference Finals appearance against Golden State many moons ago. And even now, going over to Milwaukee, I feel like, and maybe this will ramp up down the stretch as we get closer to the postseason, we haven't necessarily done the discourse with Dame, maybe because he is so late in his career, but this is the one place, man, if you could go back and deliver here and maybe jumpstart it a little bit, all of a sudden gets us started talking differently. Coming up next, we'll start talking about some different homes for some of the top free agents this NFL offseason next. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Hour number 2, we'll talk to two-time Super Bowl champion from the Kansas City Chiefs, Sneed, coming up in just a little bit this hour about what it takes to go into that, the secret sauce with Steve Spagnuolo and all that great stuff. But, Dad, we're at this point now where we're getting late into February here. Pitchers and catchers have reported in Major League Baseball, and that means spring is right around the corner. And spring means renewal, and with renewal comes a really roundabout way for me to go away from baseball and talk about the NFL offseason here. Now on DraftKings Sportsbook, they've got this great next team odds for a number of NFL players that are going to be that we thought would be a great opportunity on a Friday morning to try and jam some more NFL into your life while we're still basking into the glow of Super Bowl week. So, Dad, we can go on, and we did a lot of quarterback fits on Wednesday. We've got some other players mixed in amongst the quarterbacks that are going to be free agents coming up this offseason, or players whose futures have just been called into question that you can now gamble on DraftKings Sportsbook and try and figure out where you think they're going to wind up next. So I wanted to start off, Dad. We've got the running back conversation that just kind of got put on pause for a year that just got moved over to this offseason. So looking here and starting with the biggest boy at the party, I saw offseason workout videos of one Derrick Henry that terrify me to no end. Next team odds for Derrick Henry, Dad, have Baltimore as the favorite at plus 200, with then Philadelphia, Dallas, and Houston all on the board. Dad, what do you think the most likely landing spot is for one of the scariest lads in the entire league?
Well, I would say, with a guy who every year says we're playing for the Super Bowl and this and that and haven't been there since 96, I could see Dallas making a play. Remember, Tony Pollard is a free agent as well. Now, Tony Pollard did better in the two-back system with Zeke Elliott than he did when he was the feature back. So, and we know Pollard can catch the ball out of the backfield as well. So do you team up those two in the backfield? Remember, it's not going to cost you a lot, right? These running backs are not getting these monster deals, and it's not all of a sudden going to change this year. So from the standpoint of that, of the amount of money it may cost you. Now, to think that they would sign two free agent running backs in Pollard or Derrick Henry would seem a bit odd, but it wouldn't stun me with Jerry Jones, considering what they can try and do, because they need that running game that they didn't have to help out Dak in the passing game. So it wouldn't be, and maybe Tony Pollard moves on somewhere else, quite honestly, and maybe they do bring a Derrick Henry to get that running game going again. But that wouldn't shock me one bit. Baltimore, will Baltimore go down that road, Mike? Baltimore, we have Saquon Barkley, we have Josh Jacobs, other running backs, Austin Eckler, as I said, Tony Pollard. Baltimore last year was number 1 in the league rushing. Justice Hill, Gus Edwards, Lamar Jackson, and they brought in, I know, Dalvin Cook at the playoff time, but they didn't do anything there. Do they really need to make some changes? You were number 1. I mean, do you want to shift that up right now and spend some money on that when you can maybe spend it in other spots when you're already the top in the league in that category?
So I think the only thing I'd say for Baltimore is you've got to find a way to continue to evolve every year. They can't come back static. And I think a lot of us assume that's going to look like the wide receiver room, adding more around Zay Flowers, who was great last year, and trying to continue to develop that. But we all saw in the postseason that kind of ran away from the run at the wrong time. More of that falls on the play caller, but I do wonder, Dad, if a little bit of thunder and lightning might go a long way. I know they felt like they got some of that from Gus Edwards, but Derrick Henry's the final boss of all that. If you get back a healthy Keaton Mitchell and what he afforded you as that player who was the lightning portion of that backfield with a guy in Derrick Henry. I mean, Dad, think about every play. If you've got a read option with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, the weird calculus that a defensive player's got to do to figure out how they want their life to be a living hell, and just seeing Derrick Henry in purple and black, I go rule of cool on this, and I say I'm going to pray to every God who will listen that he winds up in that system there where they do a lot of under center stuff. It's a lot of things that could work well in what Derrick Henry's traditionally done well as a rusher.
You know, we sit here and talk about backs, and we'll talk about them all. Obviously, I mentioned Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, Tony Pollard. You know Jim Harbaugh is getting himself a back, right? Eckler was there last year. Eckler played in 14 games. He averaged he averaged 3.5 yards a carry. Didn't have that year rushing, but we know what he can do out of the backfield. Had over 50 receptions, so we know what he is out of the backfield. You know Jim's getting a guy, a runner, right? I mean, he lived off that at Michigan and making sure you could run the ball. So that is going to be of utmost importance for him. So is that a Derrick Henry or a Saquon Barkley or a Josh Jacobs? And then again, same question like Dallas. What do you do with Austin Eckler, who is a free agent as well? But you know that's something Harbaugh wants to take care of is that backfield. And again, I'll go to, and it's a shame for the running backs, but they are not in great position to have these monster deals.
I was going to ask, do you think any of what we saw, especially this postseason, which seemed to be a rushing renaissance, we saw Christian McCaffrey as the NFL's Offensive Player of the Year this year and what he was able to do for a team that was a mature roster already in San Francisco, but clearly has been a better football team, record-wise and otherwise, since Christian came over. Do you think that did anything for some of these running backs heading into this offseason after that discourse last year?
No, because I don't think so, because I think he has separated himself, right? He had the most touches in the NFL, leading rusher in the NFL, and you see what he is out of the backfield. It's got to be the versatile threat. You can't be just good at the one thing. It's where we are in the NFL, from the quarterback position being versatile, pass and run, to the running back being able to line up like a wide receiver or in the slot or to motion. Like CMC does in San Francisco. So I think he's a bit of an outlier because of all he can do and how good he is at doing all the things that he can do.
I would agree. I do think Saquon Barkley becomes the most interesting in this group then for that reason, just because of that. Injury is the biggest complicating factor. Derrick Henry's 30 years old, but he's been a tank for the majority of his career. He's been able to weather a pretty high carry load each and every season and still bounce back. And now you're assuming wherever he goes, he's going to have that offset now. He's not going to be asked to be the bell cow in the same ways that he was. And so you're going to get a guy who can be more physical for you less often during the body of a game. Dad, Saquon Barkley, 27 years old heading into it this year. According to DraftKings Sportsbook, the Giants, the favorite to retain him at -150, followed then by Houston at +275, the Chargers at +400, and Chicago, a distant last, at +1600 here. Where would you like to see Saquon Barkley end up the most?
I think this would be a good landing spot for him with the Chargers. I do, because there's limited backs Harbaugh is going to have available that are true runners as well. Barkley is one of them, and how he could help that offense. So I could see a guy like him. Houston's different, a lot of motion, a lot of empty sets. So I'm not sure where that goes. But I look at the Chargers. You want to throw the Bears in there as a team that's trying to build and going to have to spend some money, obviously, to do it. But I still say one of these big-time backs is going to end up with the Chargers. I think that is about as much of a certainty as you can say, knowing what Harbaugh likes to do.
I would agree. The only reason I worry about that as a fit for Saquon is just the injury has popped up a fair amount, especially when volume has been the play there. I think for the Texans, when you look at them, especially the way the fit would be for a guy like Saquon, who I think can do multiple things because he's such a great athlete, because we've seen him as a pass catcher as well. They're a team, Houston, that's going to line up an eye a lot on early downs. Bobby Slowick had C.J. Stroud under center a bunch. And certainly he can help you a lot with that, but I think he's the most versatile of the guys that we talk about in terms of skill set here. And Houston's got other options, right? You're coming in, and C.J. Stroud is going to be the sun and the moon in the center of that offense and the way that they run it. They're going to be distributing to when healthy. Nico Collins, who was great last year, when Tank Dell gets back healthy. All of those and whatever else they add in a passing attack that's got one of the best young quarterbacks in the NFL. So you're not going to need Saquon to do as much, but we saw last year, hey, when Devin Singletary got going in earnest on that offense, it changed a lot, but they weren't a consistent enough rushing attack last year. So I would kind of like to see Saquon join that group who really seems like they're on the uptick right now. Dad, the last one that kind of rounds out this running back group is Josh Jacobs, who was a part of this conversation last year, had a bit of a down year relative to the season before where he was the rushing champ. According to DraftKings, he is the Las Vegas Raiders are the favorite to retain him, minus 200, followed by the Chargers, followed by Houston, followed by Baltimore. So it's really the same quartet of teams trying to play musical chairs with these three running backs right here. Josh Jacobs and this current scene with what Antonio Pierce wants to prioritize. And I saw him on the podcast with the guys over at the Pivot the other day saying we want it to look, sound, and feel the right way, meaning he wants a physical football team. Josh Jacobs does seem to fit the mold of what they want with that group as they try and make sure whoever is going to come in and play quarterback has a lot to work with around them.
Yeah, especially if you're going to keep Aiden O'Connell a quarterback or even go young at quarterback, you're going to want a running game to surround that. I don't know what the relationship is anymore with Josh Jacobs and the Raiders because if you're not getting him, then you're going out and trying to get one of these other backs, right? I mean, he's the guy. Only played 13 games this year. Again, averaged 3.5 yards. But the last couple of years, as you mentioned, was the rushing champ. He's had last year before this, a couple of years of 50-some receptions out of the backfield as well. To me, he's the more interesting one. Everybody will talk a lot about Henry and Barkley. But I think Josh is an interesting one on what he can do. And I would be surprised if the Raiders let him go somewhere else. Like I said, if they do, they're going to have to bring in somebody else who can get the job done because if they are going to have as I said, the young quarterback have to going to rely on that run game. And Josh has proven himself.
And Josh, the youngest one of the bunch that we're talking about right now, Josh Jacobs, 26 years old, moving into the prime of that career. And it's a love the one you're with situation because I do think, Dad, a lot of these guys, Saquon had a little bit of injury this year, and the Giants' offense overall didn't perform as well as expected. But when he was on the field, he was much more productive than, let's say, his counterpart in Daniel Jones, who the Giants did decide to pay last offseason instead of their running back, to the dismay of a lot of people. Injury popped up there. Derrick Henry and the Titans, it was sort of an interesting year because the offensive line was in turnover. You had a rookie quarterback that went out there. Josh Jacobs, like we said, had a down year relative too, but overall, we look around the NFL, Dad, and I think people have recognized the market inefficiency with a lot of these top defenses that you could run right down the middle of. We saw it happen in the postseason, and so I think we've got probably a gap year here before that starts to course correct, where you're either going to see defenses load the box more or these big run stuff and D tackles, bigger body linebackers starting to make a comeback in the NFL to offset a little bit of that. And so in the meantime, I do think a lot of these teams, especially the ones where you don't have a Mahomes, Allen, Lamar Jackson at quarterback, are going to say, hey, we probably need to make sure we're in position to go out and beat people up inside the box next year, or else we're going to be behind the eight ball again. And so there are going to be a priority to some extent, and it might, in your point, be right. The incumbent's going to have a chance to win out on those since you're already in the building and used to it.
Yeah, and I mean, running backs can only hope they become a focal point again to try and help them in the pay scale, of which, I remember last year when they had the running back call where everybody kind of aired their grievances, and unfortunately it's not going to do any good. I don't know what's going to change this for the running backs in the immediate future. Maybe down the road we'll see again. But as of now, we're talking about, three backs, and I mentioned a couple more who are free agents, but teams have to understand it's not going to really be a monster cap hit for you.
No, and I mean, there's always the draft too that you have for guys. I mean, hell, we talked about in the Super Bowl. Yeah, Christian McCaffrey was on one side. Isaiah Pacheco had been a story of the playoffs, and the dude was a 7th round pick. Like, that's the other part of this is, again, and I'll say, it is the most accessible body type for a position in the NFL. You can have such a range of guys in size, speed, and skill set that can be effective running backs for you in the league. And when you piece them all together with quarterbacks that are now a more added part of the run game than ever before, it does unfortunately create a situation where that position becomes a little bit individually less valuable. Not the idea of running back overall, which we clearly saw has a major effect on outcomes, but just because of all those other factors, it gets tough. Dad, let's look at wide receiver a little bit here. A bunch of interesting names that are coming up, starting with Mike Evans, the Tampa Bay stud wide receiver coming off his 10th straight 1,000-yard season at 30 years old. Tampa Bay minus 165 favorites to retain him. The Chicago Bears, Houston Texans, and Kansas City Chiefs rounding out the 2, 3, and 4 spot there, Dad. This seems like one, I don't know how, if you're Tampa, considering the surprise success that you had last year, you can let a guy that's a future Hall of Famer and has been a franchise stalwart for you walk out the building at this point.
Yeah, I don't see how you can do it. And for Evans, if he is to look around, I think, listen, the guy's been in the league, what's going to be his 11th year or so, something like that, and, perennial 1,000-yard gainer. He's going to want to go on a team, I believe, unless there's a monster difference in the money that's being offered, probably a team that's closer to the title instead of like a money grab. Who is that going to? Could you imagine if Kansas City tried to put in some money for him, which would be unbelievable because they're always going to be looking for a wide receiver. But I'm with you. I think it would be somewhat shocking if he got out of Tampa Bay. I think Baker Mayfield stays there. I think Evans does a shorter deal there as well and stays to see what they can do. So I think Baker and Evans run it back again in Tampa Bay.
I would agree. Tampa Bay and Mike Evans feel like one of those last remaining spots where we saw teams this year in a league that's dominated by so many of these Shanahan-McVay offenses where it's underneath routes, it's digs and in-breaking routes and guys getting yards after the catch. Mike Evans is one of those last few guys that we just see, hey, we're going to line you up one-on-one on the outside and we're going to throw a million go balls your way. And we're going to assume that you're going to come down with more than 50% of these. The old line, it's not a 50-50 ball when it's going to Mike Evans. It's a 75-25 ball, or however you want to phrase it. It does seem like we don't have nearly as much of that anymore, with the exception of maybe another guy who's coming up who's probably going to be the most talked about guy in this class because he's young, because he's coming up off that rookie deal, in T. Higgins out of Cincinnati. The Bengals have had that great foundation for Joe Burrow where they had Jamar Chase and T. Higgins both in that wide receiver core while they couldn't block for Joe. And now at 25 years old, he's getting set now. A lot of people assume, Dad, and the odds reflect this, that Cincinnati's just going to hit him with the franchise tag. So it's minus 500 in DraftKings for Cincinnati to retain him there. And that seems like probably the way to go on this because you've still been trying to rebuild that offensive line in Cincinnati, and they might continue to add to that in the draft this year. But maintaining that wide receiver core when Joe Burrow comes back healthy seems like the smart move.
Yeah, this is one of those where you have to project out, right? Because you're going to have to project out what you have to pay Jamar Chase as well, because that bill is going to come a-calling. And so it's when do you want to spread the money out? Remember, if you do the gets tagged, that's going to be about $20 million for T. Higgins that he's going to get in the area of. So a lot of times, do you want to do a longer deal to try and spread that out to keep the cap number a little lower? As I mentioned, you got Jamar Chase coming up behind that. So this is a capologist job here to decide we're going to pay, when are we going to pay, and is it still the economically sound way to just tag them this year, pay that 1 year, pay that $20 million, and then go from there? I don't know. See, that's the interior of the money decision makers there, but either way, he's not leaving Cincinnati. Let me just say that. However that works out, I believe he's going to be in Cincinnati and probably going to be tagged.
To your point about Jamar Chase, this is the first season now coming up where he'll be eligible for a long-term extension since he was a first-round pick. So they have the option to lock in his fifth-year option that starts on May 2nd, that deadline for teams to pick up the 2025 fifth-year option for those first-round picks. And so you're right, Jamar Chase is going to be there on the long term, and it's just going to be, hey, do you try and extend him now and keep the cap hit low early so you can absorb T. Higgins for one more year and try and run it back with this group while you feel like you've got a good core together? Defensively, we know Cincinnati's already hit an influx of young talent along the defensive line and that defensive backfield. They've done a lot of things similar to what Kansas City has done on that side of the ball once you pay your quarterback in Joe Burrow, who is, coming back off injury, but that's something we've seen for Joe Burrow before. He's been a guy that's been able to weather that, and so doing it again is something that doesn't feel outside of the realm of possibility, but gets a lot easier if you still got those two first legitimate, Jamar Chase is the true number one receiver. T. Higgins has a lot of those traits and has performed incredibly well, so it would be incredible if they were able to pull this off somehow and do a little bit of math, which we also know for the Bengals, paying out a lot of money to people isn't something they love to do. This is an historically cheap franchise, so we got to factor that in as well.
Yeah, I agree. And then the one other wide receiver, I think it's a quick mention, it's Stephon Diggs from the Bills. I don't see him leaving there. They trade him or release him. It's a $31 million cap hit. So I don't see that happening right now, trying to absorb that much of a cap hit. So I still see him being with Buffalo this year.
I would agree, but man, there was a lot of smoke around that fire starting last offseason. You had the tweets coming from his family and his brother during the season there. A lot of interesting stuff there. Even more interesting stuff in Kansas City. Super Bowl champion L'Jarius Sneed joins us next on GoJo and Golic. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and got a chance to catch up with Super Bowl champion L'Jarius Sneed, the fourth-round pick on the 2020 draft by the Kansas City Chiefs. One of their great defensive backs on what went on for them in the lead-up to this Super Bowl victory. Take a listen. All right, L'Jarius, we appreciate you taking the time out to talk to us today. Congratulations on now your second Super Bowl in as many years. And we're obviously excited to talk to you about that and what's gone into this incredible run for you and the team. But wanted to first and foremost, send our condolences to you and everyone in Chiefs Nation. Obviously an incredibly tragic event at what was supposed to be a celebratory day for you guys at the parade the other day. So how are you and your teammates and your family all doing after everything that went down?
Oh, man, my family and the whole entire team, everybody's okay from my understanding, but from understanding the families, some people got injured. And I would like to send my condolences to the families and prayers up for everyone who got hurt, everyone was involved.
Yeah, and like I said, before we get into this year and this game, did you and your teammates talk about anything after you learned what happened?
Oh, yeah, man, we just couldn't believe it. Once everybody got on the bus, we were just in shock, For that to go down in such of a moment where we celebrating our accomplishments and for that to happen, it was crazy.
It's incredibly sad, and like you said, on a day that was supposed to be special for so many. So like you said, we're obviously thinking and praying for everyone that was injured. Unfortunately, the one person who lost their life in this as well. And, hopefully, and I'm sure the city and the team will wrap their arms around them as you guys so often do. No easy transition and all this, L'Jarius, but obviously we do want to talk about what led to, the celebration that you guys were supposed to be having, and that's another Super Bowl win for you. So now back-to-back championships, 2 and 4 years for you as a player. What was the second one like in comparison to the first for you when that final whistle blew?
Oh, man, I don't think it never gets old. My first one I won last year, I was kind of excited. Well, I was very excited, but I came this year, man, it seemed like I got even more excited. I don't think it never gets old. I think, I want another one.
Is there a difference for some of the San Francisco players, now some were on the team the last time they were in the Super Bowl, but others new to it, you guys all having the experience, is there something to going into those 2 weeks, especially the week at the Super Bowl place you're going to play, that may give you an advantage over players that haven't been there?
Oh, man, I just want to say shout out to Coach Reed. He give us every situation, everything, what's going to happen. We got 2 weeks to study and get on top of the game plan or whatever we need to go over. And Reed, he get over it and cover everything.
I would say a lot's been made of Andy Reid covering the situation you guys found yourself in overtime with the new overtime rules, the video that's come out now of Patrick Mahomes and his reaction when San Francisco announced that they were going to receive the ball in overtime. For you as the defensive player that was getting ready to go on the field, walk us through what you guys were thinking when you saw and heard that San Francisco wanted to take the ball and that you guys were going to be up first.
Oh, man, we loved it, man. We go out there, we go put the D on the field, we make them stop and make it stop. And we believe in our offense and the Reed. We know they're going to go down and score the ball in that type of situation.
And you guys did. You held San Francisco to a field goal in that case, and then you go down and score the touchdown and win the Super Bowl. I'm wondering at halftime, you guys were down at halftime, but you've been down in the playoffs at halftime. So what was said in the locker room at halftime of this game when you went in down?
Oh, man, on defense, we made a couple of adjustments, and I'm pretty sure they did the same thing on offense. And, there, we said we're going to put pressure on them, apply more pressure, and that's what we did. And so happily it did work, and we came up victorious.
Pressure is something everyone associates with your defensive coordinator, Steve Spagnuolo. I saw Justin Reed with the In Spags We Trust shirts. What makes him so special as a coordinator for you guys?
Oh, man, Spags, he'll throw all type of stuff at you. He'll have D-line playing linebackers. He'll have linebackers playing safety. You'll never know what Spags going to throw at you, and that's what I love about him, man. He ain't no one-trick pony.
Yeah, I imagine defensive players would love to play in a scheme like that. How about through your season? You guys had some ups and downs. Talk about that the year before you beat Philadelphia in the Super Bowl, but the expectation was for you guys to be there. This year there were a few bumps in the road. Talk about how you guys managed the season.
Oh, man, this whole entire season, I say from the start, we had adversity. No one believed in us. But as a team and as a whole organization, we believed in each other. We all stayed down. We came to work every day with our big boy pants on, ready to work. And, it paid off. Each day we came in ready to work, and I saw that them guys fake each week.
Well, speaking of it paying off, you've put yourself through your play in a position to be a very rich man coming up this offseason. I'm curious for you, going into this year for you personally, what was your goal? What did you want to improve on as a player that's now got you ready to cash in like this?
Man, I just wanted to wake the whole entire world up, man. At the beginning of the season, I told myself, just wake the world up. No one still believe in you. Just stay down and go hard. And I set goals of what I had. I reached a couple of those goals. The main goal was to get back to the Super Bowl, man. I think we accomplished that as a team.
Yeah, I'd say you did. And also you accomplished it as the youngest defense in the league this year. The only other time the youngest defense in the league won the Super Bowl was 2009 and the Indianapolis Colts. So you're in some really good company there. So what will your offseason entail? As Mike said, you're getting ready to look for a new deal. So does that change your offseason at all?
Oh, no, the money don't change. Nothing's going to change about me. I'm coming to work every day. Like I usually been coming to work. I think I'm just going to get hungrier and hungrier because, honestly, man, they still don't believe in me. Everybody's still sleeping on me, and I feel like I have some more to prove.
Well, listen, we saw one of your other teammates in Chris Jones, who's getting ready to go through a similar offseason, say at the parade he wants to run it back. Is that true for both of you guys? Do you want to be back in Kansas City? How are you approaching free agency?
Man, I love to be in Kansas City. I don't want to go nowhere. It's home. Been home for the last 4 years for me. They opened me up with open arms. They gave me a chance, and I definitely wouldn't want to leave here. Try to learn another scheme, another team, and all of that. But I love to be here. But wherever the chips lay, they lay.
How often do you guys, because your defense played so well, we know about the offense. When you're going through training camp, how much do you do good on good, ones on ones, where you can have that little competition with them?
I think that's the whole entire training camp. I don't think no other training camp is like Andy Reid's training camp. And that's why we be ready, man. That's why we be ready. Andy Reid be on this.
I can say Andy Reid and Spag seem to have you guys always ready. And in a variety of ways, you mentioned all the different ways you get used on that defense. For you, Trent McDuffie, we see you guys blitzing and going towards the quarterback all the time. I'm curious for you as a defensive back, would you rather an interception on a drive or a drive-ending sack going towards the quarterback?
I'll say interception. Getting the offense back the ball is very big because ain't no telling what I do with that ball in my hand,
It's incredible. But I guess I just asked because I'm so in awe of the way you and Trent and all these guys get after the quarterback. Like, as a defensive back, what does it take to be a great blitzer, especially in a scheme like Spags?
Oh, man, you just got to blitz with violence. You can't blitz slow. You got to blitz fast. And, the big guys, they can't get to us, man. We get low to the ground, and with speed, they can't get to us. And that's why I love it.
How you played a lot? I know you played a wide receiver in high school. So before you went to college, Louisiana Tech, was there a thought that you would be on the offensive side of the field going forward, or did you always know it would be defense? Yeah,
going into college, I begged them to put me on the offensive side. I begged them the whole entire camp. They wouldn't let me know. So Skip Holtz told me he wanted me to be a defensive back, and so having it worked out, man.
It's definitely worked out well. And like we said, you're now a two-time Super Bowl champion in 4 seasons. You're getting ready, like you said, for a well-deserved payday coming up. And if you end up back in Kansas City, we got to start talking to Big Red then about getting you a play on offense here. He draws up all these crazy red zone plays. We got to get him to put you on offense throwing the ball. How about that?
I mentioned it to him right before the Super Bowl. He said he'll think about it, though. So hopefully right, when I'm in that shit, he'll throw me in there.
There we go, exactly. We'll clip that and make sure we spam the Chiefs Twitter account with that so Big Red knows exactly what time it is. L'Jarius, congratulations on all the success, man. We're super excited for you, and we appreciate you giving us some time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, Dad, I've said this over the years until I'm blue in the face, and I'll continue to say it, that if you wanted to save the NFL's Pro Bowl, all you need to do is let the NFC and AFC football players play a 5-on-5 pickup basketball game. Because all every football player really wants in this world is to be a basketball player and to be respected as such. Yep. And since we're going into the NBA All-Star Weekend, let's combine forces on those, because one of the best young football players in the NFL made some NBA-related news this week. Houston Texans rookie quarterback C.J. Stroud, the offensive rookie of the year, wanted to remind everybody that he is, in fact, about that life. He went on Micah Parsons' podcast, Setting the Edge, and described a time in high school where he faced Miami Heat guard Jaime Jaquez and how that one went for him. Take a listen.
You seen the highlights. Roll the clip.
The JV highlights? Pull the JV highlights up. Pull the JV highlights up. This is a JV basketball team.
No. Do you know who the star player on the Miami Heat is right now other than Jimmy Butler? Jaime Jaquez. Played at UCLA. That game I scored 40 points was on him. That's Jaime Jaquez right there, the center. Stop playing with me, bro. Stop playing with me.
What is this, freshman basketball?
No, this is varsity basketball.
Bro, he does not look like he's...
Number 24. Ask him about it.
Bro, he was probably a bum then.
No. You see how I got the crowd rocking?
That was JV.
Just one quick question. Yes or no?
Yes.
Have you ever had a moment where they rushed the floor for you hitting a game winner past the three-point line?
Yes. Not past the three-point line.
Yes. Did you score 100 points too?
I used to average a 20-20.
And Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, like, I would have averaged 40.
I promise. So the two biggest arguments that happen in every college football locker room in America are how your high school football team would have done against one of your teammates' high school football teams in games that can never be played, and then who would go out and beat who on the basketball court. That right there is the biggest window into a college or professional football locker room you will ever see in your entire life.
Without question. I mean, football players there's the ones who can hoop, i.e. see the tight end position normally, and those who think they can hoop, right? There are always those guys that think they can hoop, but then they would get against really good competition and realize they can't hoop. But you're right. That's the biggest thing. If you did pickup games, and it is now in contracts, I think it's in Pat Mahomes' contract that he can't play pickup basketball games. You look in a lot of these contracts of what players can and can't do in the offseason. Pickup basketball is one of the things teams do not want them doing, turning an ankle or hurting themselves somehow, some way. But there are no doubt great basketball players who play football, and we always wonder about the opposite of who a great basketball player would be that would be a great football player, and it always goes to LeBron James, but there would be others as well. Myself, Mike, I never, ever was a basketball player. I mean, when you talk about kids playing all sports growing up, I never played basketball. I mean, I did swimming first. I did football. I did baseball. I did track and field. But mostly I did wrestling. During basketball season, wrestling went on, and I was a wrestler from grade school up through wrestling at Notre Dame as well. So I never played basketball, and I was never good at basketball outside of giving you fouls and rebounding and pickup games. I have zero basketball talent.
So you never played, did you guys, and this is not me age shaming you, I promise, I just forget the year this started. You guys didn't have bookstore basketball when you were Notre Dame, did you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I played bookstore basketball. Yep, had to run from practice to get to a game. Yeah, exactly.
For anyone unaware, bookstore basketball at Notre Dame is a massive tradition. It is, I believe, the largest outdoor 5-on-5 basketball tournament at least in the country, if not the world, where every year, usually a combination of students on campus and some of the athletes would go over and play this large 5-on-5, and it got heated. Like, to your point about football coaches not wanting players to play, when Brian Kelly and their staff got to Notre Dame, it wasn't necessarily explicitly stated, but they really didn't want us going over there and messing with bookstore because they were worried guys would get hurt. My freshman year, our good friend of the program, Dane Christ, and his team, Hallelujah, Holla Back, won the bookstore championship. And man, I tell you, you've never seen an angrier group of people than the normal Notre Dame students who had to watch the varsity athletes team win the bookstore basketball title. It is the most Capulets and Montagues, one side versus the other, that it gets around that school when it came up there, when that comes. But you didn't even you played in that, but not very well. I want to establish that.
Oh, no. There are teams that just went in it to have fun. The best part of the bookstore basketball were the names of the teams that you could actually put in print. That was the fun of it, is to make the name. But then there were those teams who tried to stack, with scholarship athletes. And I think you could only have X amount on a team. I forgot what it was. But when I was at school, Jerry Faust was our head coach. Jerry Faust was on a bookstore basketball team. So, I mean, there was no restrictions then. We'd run right from spring ball to our game and play. Oh, I was awful. I'm an awful basketball player, and I've showed it, unfortunately.
Well, yes. So this is where we've ultimately come to. Now, C.J. Stroud and Micah Parsons were talking about that because they're going to take part in the NBA All-Star Celebrity Game that's coming up tonight. A game which, going back to the 2013-2014 NBA season, you played in, Dad, as a part of the East team. You and Mike Greenberg, your former co-host on Mike and Mike, were part of this game Friday, February 14th of 2014 in New Orleans. And I remember most of our family went down there for this game. And Dad, in a game where Kevin Hart won the MVP, there was a Victoria's Secret model in there. Snoop Dogg played in that game. Michael B. Jordan, the Secretary of Education, Arnie Duncan, who took it way too seriously. You came out with your one shining moment in this game, Dad. You had about one scoring opportunity, and how'd it go for you?
Horrible. I mean, absolutely horrible. First off, I was in horrible shape. I actually wore a shirt under my jersey, and a guy drove to the lane, and I was open, and he dished it to me. I jumped maybe 3 inches off the ground, and I clanked a layup. I hit the bottom of the rim in a layup. It was absolutely horrific. I looked horrific. I felt horrific, but I will not make that as an excuse, because if you're on the court or on the field to play, you got to play. But it was horrible. Mike, that game was horrific to me. I've played in celebrity games before, and they're normally you have fun. This one, nobody wanted to have fun. I tried to have fun. I tried to mess around. The refs never cracked a smile. Arnie Duncan played this thing like it was his NBA Finals. And he always did when he was in this game. So much so that Kevin Hart got the MVP award, and he gave it to Arnie Duncan, who had like 20 points in this game. I think he had, 20 points and 11 rebounds. He played it like it was the last thing he was doing on earth, and I could not understand why. And at one point, I'm like, screw it. Go ahead. Have a ball. Be the star of a celebrity basketball game. Congratulations. I was horrific. Greeny took one shot in this. He airballed it. I mean, we were so bad that next year, Greeny and I became the coaches. We were the coaches of either team. They kept us off the court, and they put us on off the court of play and put us in as coaches. But I looked horrible there. I felt horrible. We all went out and I just drank myself, I think, into oblivion after that one as everybody was out watching it. I think I got in the stat book, I believe, with one rebound in that game, and then took my spot near the end of the bench.
Yeah, that was, if you are not a person that normally watches the YouTube, today would be a day to just go to, in the second hour in this back half and get a little window into my dad going for jumping off 2 feet, shooting the layup with 2 hands. You shot the ball like a wrestler. You 100% shot the ball like a wrestler in that spot.
Yeah, I did. Like I said, I never played, which is really surprising when I think back on it, to never, even in grade school, I never played any kind of organized basketball. It was always messing around. And so I just tried to be a big body out there. But I was a big, I made up for being big by being slow and not being able to shoot. I mean, it was, and again, I tried to have fun in this game. I mean, it just, nobody did. I was so bummed at that. Kevin Hart did, because he's just a funny guy and a really cool dude. Snoop, obviously, as well. But for the most part, man, people were running up and down that court. I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, Dad missed the memo that this is a game you actually had to try hard in. I feel personally responsible for letting you go out there with that blue undershirt on. That's on me, Mom, and the rest of the family for letting that happen here now. So good luck to everybody in the Celebrity All-Star Game. And just remember, if you miss hilariously in this one, it will live forever, and you'll be shamed by your family for it years later on a national show. All right, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you off into your weekend here. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out here live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern, live on the DraftKings Network, DraftKingsNetwork.com, the YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, and more. Let somebody know about it. And if you missed any of it today, or our great guest, thanks to L'Jarius Sneed, 2-time Super Bowl champion, defensive back for the Kansas City Chiefs. You can check that out wherever you get your podcast or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done. And Dad, it's time to clear out the paint. If you or a loved one know a man between the ages of 20 and 50 at this point in time, get ready to not see them for the majority of the summer here, because yesterday, all of the rumors, all the articles, all of the hearsay finally gave way to EA coming out and putting it on wax. This is the full trailer for EA's College Football 25. Watch and learn.
Got something special for y'all. A little update for our fans from the Big House to the Bayou, from Carolina to California. Yeah, it's about college football. We know you love it. Us too. Rivalries, comebacks, the traditions and superstitions built by generations. There's nothing like it. Turns out, we've been building too. So let's address the big owl in the room. Yeah, we've seen the posts, the predictions, the doubts. We get it. It's been a minute. Let's just say, this ain't the only jersey we've been working on. Game this sport deserves. Because pretty soon, this place will be full again. Until then, cue the crowd noise.
Dad, I didn't play the NCAA football game when it was around in college much. I played it some. We had the team player lounge in our facility at Notre Dame. But I kind of took it for granted back then. We would love as players going each and every year and trying to find the player that was supposed to be us in our bio and what our rating was in the game when it would come out, like everybody else. But I took it for granted like a lot of people. And then it went away in 2014, and I know the reasons why, and I appreciate the sentiment behind why, but that doesn't mean we didn't miss it. And so now to know that it is confirmed coming back that this summer we are going to get the EA Sports College Football 25 game has me thrilled. I'm probably going to start a streaming career. I got chills right now watching that. I doubt this means much to you, Dad, but for a lot of people around my age, this game, Madden, and the ability to build out and be the head of your own college football team, for me to be able to now go and run the most corrupt version of a football program possible as I try and take them to national championship heights is an opportunity I cannot wait for.
Yeah, this is something this is past me a little bit. I never did a lot of video games, in all honesty, even growing up, but certainly not this. But what it does, I do remember you would hear college guys and really NFL players as well. They would take their game systems on the road and play in the hotel room. I mean, that it's so addictive. It is. There are going to be people just for hours. The honeydew list is getting put to the side right now. For people that have something they have to do, when all of a sudden they start playing and don't realize it is 8 hours later and they've peed themselves because they haven't put down the controller.
Well, I mean, speaking of peeing yourselves, our crack team here at GoJo and Golic decided to mock up the EA Sports 25 cover of me with my pee pants from Notre Dame Senior Day circa 2012. PA Sports, it's in the stain, coming to a system near you this upcoming summer, Dad. I promise you this. In addition to likely peeing my pants while I play the game also, you should have peed your pants in the All-Star game. That was your big mistake.
Yeah.
You're distracted from your shot with urine in your pants. I know there's a big debate amongst... look there you go. See, there's your pee pants.
You can't do that. That is photoshopping. I will sue somebody. I did not pee myself, and I was bad enough, let alone peeing myself.
Peeing your pants is cool. Consider us the Golics for whatever that means.
Yeah.
So we look forward to that coming up this summer. Dad, let's get to that, though. With some news out of the world, we talked to Thierry Henry and the crew from the covering the Champions League, and we got some footy news right after that. Kylian Mbappe, pound for pound, probably the best young star in the world of soccer, who wowed everyone during the last World Cup with his battle against Messi in that final, is set to leave Paris Saint-Germain at the end of this season when his contract expires, and immediately will become the most sought-after free agent there. He's communicated that decision to PSG. The terms of his exit aren't fully agreed on, and an official announcement is expected once the situation's finalized in the next few months. The Athletic reported that he's leaning towards joining Real Madrid upon the expiration of this deal, but the influential members of his entourage have been left unconvinced by the Spanish club's offer. So I'm sure there's going to be some posturing that goes on, but Dad, I'm sure the Saudis, who have already thrown money at him, I believe, before or attempted to, are going to be back in this conversation. But this seems like a guy who is going to get whatever he wants out of this.
So if Real Madrid's going to go after him again in January of 22, I think it was, they threw a $26 million a year a deal with a $130 million signing bonus his way. He renewed with PSG. So if they're into this, they're going to have to come to the table a lot more than that. Remember, he was, I think, the second biggest transfer behind Neymar. I think it was about 180 mil when he went to PSG when he transferred for the transfer fee there. And you're right, Saudi did go after him. The report was that they gave him a $700 million contract offer, of which he turned down. So I think this is kind of like baseball. There's probably only a couple of teams out there that can afford him. And he's going to be 25. He's 24 years old now. And I mean, it's going to be, he already makes ridiculous money, and he is going to just up that list and be right up near the top of highest paid athletes ever.
If you're an American who somehow missed the last World Cup and seeing him, this is one of those guys. We talked about box office, Caitlin Clark, all that stuff. Kylian Mbappe, you don't have to have a working knowledge of soccer to watch the way that man plays the game and understand that his better is better than everyone else's better out there. So very excited to see where he ends up. Dad, let's get to the third here. We've all had a lot of interesting experiences flying here. I have never had maggots delaying the flight on the bingo card, but that's exactly what happened for a Delta Airlines flight that was supposed to go from Amsterdam to Detroit. An airline spokesperson confirmed that Flight 133 AMS to DTW was interrupted due to an improperly packed carry-on. Apparently, someone had a rotten fish in their carry-on bag that fell out of the overhead, accompanied by a gaggle of maggots that fell next to somebody. People originally thought it was a plank until the staff from the airline said, "Oh no, this is real, and we're not going to fly this plane full of maggots." Dad, I don't have the weakest stomach in the world. I'd have puked everywhere if a bunch of maggots landed next to me. That's just one that's immediately hits the button.
And I was reading you're allowed to carry either meats or fruits, frozen or not. And this person had a wrapped fish that had spoiled, just as you mentioned, and the maggots fell on somebody. When this was open and the maggots fell out, they fell on a passenger sitting. Could you imagine? You're sitting there, and I mean, listen, at other times, if a flight got bumpy or something, maybe you've had a drink or some water spilled on you, maggots fell on somebody. Maggots. I mean, so you have a couple of Delta flights where maggots have fallen one time, and then another time somebody had, as they termed, explosive diarrhea. Delta is not, I mean, listen, they have a great on-time record, but as far as foreign things on the plane that are ruining flights, maggots and diarrhea are right at the top of that nasty list.
Would you rather be on maggot plane or diarrhea plane? Go.
Maggot plane, because it's more, diarrhea plane went everywhere from the passenger. Maggots fell in kind of one spot. So I think for the most part, they were, and maggots, at least the smell didn't probably permeate the whole plane like the diarrhea did.
Well, if you enjoyed this podcast coated in diarrhea, maggots, and a little bit of urine, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review it, leave it a 5-star rating. Thanks so much. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you guys on Monday. Stay dry.